not. It's really about my work team. It's at work, and the work that my team does really, you know, it's about very sensitive matters, and for the whole, you know, hours of their time, they need to be reviewing sensitive matters, and therefore there has been question where uh, the staff has mentioned that the sensitivity of the matters have kind of hardened their heart, and they feel kind of indifferent or just just hard in their heart. And so I'm just wondering whether Long Po has got any kind of advice that what we could do. I was just thinking maybe Dhamma is a good thing, but doing charity works and stuff like that. But just wondering whether Ajahn would be able to maybe give some guidance. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, there's plenty of suffering and difficulties in this world around us. Sometimes it's very close in our family or our workplace, sometimes further away, but it's always there. And our human heart is very receptive. So if we do hear a lot of things, other people's problems and issues, it can affect us, of course, and affect the way we think, the way we look at ourselves, our lives, the world. We can become more negative or experience more suffering having encountered first other people's suffering. So we have to learn how to balance our interaction with other people in the world around us. And if we notice we're becoming harder, less caring, then a good antidote to that and a good practice to help deal with that is the practice of loving kindness meditation, metta bhavana, on a daily basis, at least once a day, to sit down and develop the thought and the feeling of loving kindness towards oneself and towards others as a meditation. And there are some variations how one might do that, but a simple way is to first of all bring up the feeling of love, kindness, as a feeling. So the Buddha said, well, if you can't remember that feeling, remember what it feels like to hold a newborn baby or a baby animal like a kitten or a puppy, and try and focus your attention on that feeling, maybe in your chest, your heart area. Doing this once a day, I do it usually first thing in the morning, gets you really familiar with that feeling, and it's a feeling that both soothes and calms you and comes out, radiates out from you, even if only a little bit. And that helps to cushion and to deal with some of the difficulties of interacting with other people and the problems of the world and bad news and all of that. It's a very good starting point. There's more we have to do in our practice, of course, but if one does that every day, one is becoming more and more familiar with the feeling of metta, the thought of metta. That will come out in your speech, your actions, the way you think about yourself, think about other people. It'll become much more a part of who you are. So naturally you become more tolerant and compassionate towards people, more sensitive to other people, and able to cope with some of the difficulties of our work and society and the things we're involved with.
Thank you, Tan Ajahn. May I now invite Ting Yin?
Good morning. My question is about forgiveness. It's practicing forgiveness for our own hearts. In those situations where perhaps there are some, how to practice forgiveness without appearing soft or being run over by people or taken advantage for our softness, and how to practice forgiveness with wisdom and still have some sort of right action that we're doing. Thank you.
Well, I think you just said it. We need to practice forgiveness with wisdom to keep perspective. So a lot of the practice of forgiveness is actually internal, and no one else will know what's going on except for you. And in short, you might say it's learning to not dwell on the faults of others or the unskillful things others have said and done, particularly if it's hurt us, but sometimes it's hurt people we love, not us directly, but people we love, people we know. It's not dwelling on it in your mind. So when we say not dwelling on it, we don't mean completely ignoring it, blotting it out, suppressing it. What we mean is you're aware of what has been said and done, but you're not going to let that take away your own happiness and make your mind depressed, angry in an unskillful way, or worse, holding on to the thought to harm that person back, seek revenge. So if you're not dwelling on people's faults and what they've done wrong, you still might remember and you know what they've said and done, and you may still have to act appropriately to protect yourself, avoid further problems, conflicts and so on. There may be things you have to do, so it's not being weak, but you're not doing whatever you're doing at the same time dwelling on how bad that person is and holding on to the thought of anger or even hatred towards that person, because that's toxic for yourself. You're suffering yourself, and it's actually your job to deal with that. They can't do it for you. You know, even if someone's hurt you and then they come and apologize, I mean, that's the best outcome, isn't it? They've realized their mistake and they apologize and they try and make amends. That's good. But if you still remember what they've done and you're not mindful, well, you might still get angry even after they've apologized. And people do this. Sometimes someone apologizes, but then a while later the person is still saying, oh, they did this in the past, they did that, they did this, even after they've tried their best to apologize. So what the Buddha was pointing out is that because we have memory as human beings, what we tend to do when we're not mindful is dwell on things, and particularly negative things, things that went wrong. Ourselves did something wrong, others did something wrong. And that dwelling on it, holding on to it, keeping it in mind is toxic. It makes us unhappy in the present moment, even over things that have happened, 6 years ago, 20 years ago. The record we've had in this monastery is 50 years. Somebody was holding on to a grudge against somebody else for 50 years, but they did finally manage to let it go. It can be that bad, it can be 50 years of anger. What's the point? Let it go. If it's already happened, you have to accept it's already happened. Doesn't mean to say you're approving what they've said or done. If it was bad or wrong, it was bad or wrong, you know that. But you're holding on to the anger is not helping you or them. It's only prolonging the agony, prolonging the issue. Sometimes it's all internal. It's just we're holding on to a perception of ourselves in the past. Oh, I was the one, I made that mistake, I did that wrong, I'm bad. So we do it to ourselves as well. We have to learn to forgive ourselves and accept ourselves. And that doesn't mean to say whitewashing it and, covering over the mistake that was made or ignoring it or pretending it didn't happen. You might have to learn a painful lesson, but that's a lesson and it's helping you to grow and become a better person. But then you have to let it go. You don't hold on to it and just keep hurting yourself over and over again, or feeling guilty, feeling ashamed over and over again. We have to learn to let go, but with wisdom, with awareness.
Thank you, Sadhu. Are there any more questions from the floor, please? Tan Ajahn has got some time because it is after lunch. He doesn't have to rush for his meal time, so he's happy to avail some time. Yes, may I please invite Jenny? Jenny Chung.
Hello, Ajahn. I just want to ask, do you think my
mindfulness breathing meditation, I notice there are times that when I try to, stay on to my breath, there are occasions where I only aware of my out breath, and the in breath are always very subtle to the sense that I don't really feel it at all. So should I just let it be that way, or rather have to, really look for the in breath? Because it's sometimes it's like a bit uh, disturbing me, during the meditation, that I just like couldn't find the in breath. Thank you, Ajahn.
This is a very common experience for people practicing breath meditation. Sometimes it's the in-breath is very subtle, the out-breath is coarse. Sometimes the out-breath is subtle, the in-breath is coarse. There's a variety of different experiences we'll notice. And the aim is, when we're mindful of the breath, we're just aware of the breath as it is. We're not trying to control it. We allow it to be the way it is. So if it is more subtle on the in-breath than the out, the feeling, you have to try harder. You have to be more aware, refine your awareness so you're aware of that movement coming in at the tip of the nostrils, say. It may be very subtle, almost imperceptible. Never mind. You just have to work harder to be mindful of that. And of course, if the breath out is more coarse, more obvious, well, that becomes your first anchor. You're always aware of the out-breath. If the in-breath is more subtle, well, you have to take more time to refine your awareness, develop your state of calm, firm state of mind where you're not distracted, and then you'll gradually be able to pick up on the in-breath more clearly. And what you find is, whatever way your breath is, whether it's short, long, coarse, refined, over time, as you practice more and your mindfulness becomes more steady, more clear, more continuous, your breath will naturally become very subtle, very refined. It will seem to slow down, become more subtle, and generally meditators get to the point where the mindfulness, the mind, the breath seem to merge, and the actual movement of the breath disappears. That sense of the movement in and out has become so subtle that it seems to stop, which sometimes brings up fear or worry. Am I going to die? Has my breath stopped? But take it from me, nobody's ever died just practicing meditation, watching their breath. It's never happened. That's just a thought. It's a worry, a fear. It's actually a sign that your meditation and your mindfulness is probably improving, because as the breath and the body become very subtle, very relaxed, very calm, but you're still awake, well, you get to that point where your mind and the breath merge and the movement is gone, and you're just knowing at that point where the movement of the in-breath, the out-breath has disappeared. And you may maintain that state of awareness for a long time, and usually it's accompanied by feelings of rapture and joy, bliss. It's very calming, relaxing state, very pleasurable state. You delight in it, it's enjoyable. Other distractions fade away. So even if you've had pain in your legs, you're no longer bothered by it. Even if you have sounds around you, you're no longer bothered by it. Your thoughts, your memories are no longer bothering you. Your mind is just resting, delighting in the breath, fully awake, fully alert. But maybe the very movement of the breath is gone. And you may experience that for quite a long period of time. So if you do, just enjoy it. That's your merit. That's the fruits of your karma and your practice. And what it's doing is refreshing and recharging your mindfulness so that afterwards to contemplate the Dhamma, to see impermanence, to see the lack of self in your experience, to see the body, to see feelings, to know the mind itself is much easier and clearer after you've had a nice peaceful meditation like that, where the mind and the breath has become very still. So it's something to be developed. It's a good thing. But we have to work up to that step by step, little by little. So the first thing is just getting used to sitting, being with your breath, bringing attention to the breath and accepting your breath is coarse, refined, fast, slow. Just accept that, but don't try and control it. Just relax.
What a beautiful way of describing it, Tan Ajahn. It's a very good reflection. We have the next person, Serene Yu.
Hi Ajahn. Serene, we'll need you to start your video so that we can see you. Can you see me? Yeah. Good morning, Ajahn. Thank you for the inspiring Dhamma talk. I have a question about the 5 precepts. About the first precept, abstain from killing all beings. As a lay Buddhist, what is your advice on this aspect? Because we have a lot of house pests, especially in a contracted country, and sometimes like one mosquito end up in the bedroom and you have closed all your doors and windows, but it's still there and it's bothering you. What is your advice on this? Thank you.
Well, I can tell you from the point of view of a monk is that mosquitoes don't choose between lay people or monks. They'll bite anyone. So this is part of living in the world, isn't it? There are billions of insects and billions of animals as well as billions of people, and we share the world. So the practice of kindness and compassion and the keeping the first precept is bringing you to see that we are all here, we all want to live, we all want to be safe and at peace. Even a mosquito wants to live. So you get the attitude right. And you try your best not to deliberately or intentionally harm a mosquito or any other life form. That's how you're training yourself. Of course, it's challenging, but what it does when you take on a precept is it opens up the creativity of the mind, the wisdom of the mind to say, well, okay, I've got a mosquito in my room, it's annoying, it's not what I want, but how can I deal with this problem where I keep my precept but I'm not harming the mosquito? So if it really is only one mosquito, that's probably not that hard. I mean, we have systems, we have a little paper cup and a piece of paper and the mosquito lands on the wall and you put the cup on the wall and you put the paper under the cup and then you take it out and you open the door and outside let it go and then you're back in your room and the mosquito's gone. If it's really only one mosquito, that's quite easy. For my birthday last year, somebody sent me a mosquito catcher from Canada. It's actually a see-through plastic kind of plunger, just like what I just explained, and you put it over the mosquito and it's got a moving arm and you can kind of trap the mosquito in the plunger and you take it out. So they even manufacture them nowadays. So that's one way. Just an example, when you keep a precept, instead of saying, oh, get rid of the mosquito, I hate them, and killing it, you're saying, okay, I respect the life of the mosquito, I don't like them, but I'll respect its life, and I'll look for what other way I can deal with the problem without killing it. And there usually are other ways, and we're often a bit lazy to employ these other ways. There's preventative methods, or there's methods to deal with it once the problem has arisen. You can wear mosquito repellent, you can even just let the mosquito do its thing, bite you. If in Singapore, you just turn on a fan maybe and have the fan blowing on your body and then the mosquito can't come to you. Although that's not 100% guarantee, because we used to do that in Thailand, and what we found is that the mosquitoes are so clever, when you put the fan blowing on your body, they'll walk. They land and then they'll walk along the floor and they'll walk up your leg and then start biting you because they can't fly because of the fan. So then having bitten you, they'll walk down your leg and then they walk back along the floor to get out. But the trouble is when they walk back, they're so full of blood, because often the monks are very kind, they just let the mosquitoes bite them. So the mosquito is full of blood, So he's walking along the floor, and sometimes they just collapse because they're so full of blood. That's their fault, not your fault. You're not breaking a precept.
Sorry, I cannot help laughing. Can I please invite Brother Huang Yen? Sorry, I have mispronounced your name.
No, it's perfect, Rita. Ajahn, I seem to have gotten confused recently, and somehow I managed to convince myself that some of my desires are actually good desires. Maybe you can set me straight. I love to dance, and I've worked it out in my mind that dance is a form of meditation. I do breathing. I focus on my steps on the floor. I focus on, it's like walking meditation. I focus on my partner. I'm being compassionate. And I start to desire this activity a lot in my mind. Now I know what's reasonable amount of dance, and a little bit of chocolate is okay. I get that. But I start to desire the external validation, and I seem particularly good at finding it and satisfying this need that I have. Can you put this in some perspective for me, whether it's okay to chase this, or whether I should still be searching for inner validation rather than external? Thank you.
Well, you're probably aware in monasteries we don't dance. So I gave up dancing maybe 37 years ago. I did used to dance in my youth. I was really into music, so sometimes I'd go dancing. It's certainly relaxing, like sport, running, that kind of thing. It's relaxing, it's exercise, it's social, so it can be, like you say, a form of practicing goodwill to others, doing a communal activity. Usually it's not harming anybody. Although when I was young and we'd have a dance, usually the music was too loud, so somebody would complain. And be careful with that, because when you come to meditate in the forest, then just as you're getting peaceful, then some loud music will turn on in somebody's house over there, disturbing you, and you have to reflect, this is my karma from when I was a youth, playing all that loud music, now it's coming back to disturb me, so be careful of that. But as a lay person, keeping the 5 precepts, it's not wrong necessarily to dance. But what you have to be careful of is it can be a doorway for other forms of sensuality. So say you're dancing with a partner, well, you may form too much attachment and some too much affection for your partner, maybe. I'm not saying you will, but that may happen. Affection and desire for the music. All of these things can become slightly addictive, and when something becomes addictive, what it does is it means your mind is a little bit weakened, in the sense it needs that music or that dance to feel good. And if you haven't danced for a while, you haven't had the endorphins or whatever it is, the chemicals and hormones that come out when you dance that make you feel good, just like sport and other things. You can become feel you need those things to be happy. Whereas on the higher sense, you don't. You can, as a human being, find happiness without those things. But it doesn't mean to say at this time in your life at this time it's necessarily wrong. You might find a lot of enjoyment in music, dance, art, other things like that. But just be aware it can be a basis for attachment to the senses, which sooner or later you'll probably find becomes an obstacle in your practice. So like for me, I used to play music and listen to music every single day, often for many hours a day before I was a monk. So the first few years as a monk, it was a bit like a kind of cleaning out period where I just had so much memories of music, dance and all of that. When I meditate, sometimes it would be quite tiresome having to go through all these songs and tunes and memories that would come up automatically. It wasn't like I was wanting to indulge in them. They would just come up because of previous conditioning. So it took a few years for that to fade out. Now, thankfully, I don't hear any songs in my mind. I don't have a lot of attachment to dance or music, but I can see how it can be the basis for attachment. It can be an obstacle in your practice. So if you really progress in your meditation, you might find you reach a point where you've had enough dancing, enough music. But until that point is reached, well, enjoy it. Maybe when you die, you'll be reborn in one of those heaven realms. They have them where they have Buddhist angels, devas, dancing, singing, making music in honor of the Buddha. So they have faith in the Buddha, but they still like their music. They're not yet ready for Nibbana. They'd rather have the heavenly realm of the musicians.
Could I next invite Jean, please? This would be the last question. Thank you.
Morning, Ajahn. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
It's nice to see you again after several weeks. Thank you very much. My question is about connection with other people. This month during COVID, being alone mostly at home, practice became more intense. The topic on the connection with people became very vivid. I see clearer the dynamics, which is an opposite pull from the practice for me. Can Ajahn advise me on Buddha's teaching regarding right view towards connection with other people in this regard?
This is an important part of our life because human beings are social beings. We have to start with, we have parents, often we have brothers and sisters. We live in a world populated with other human beings, so it is a necessary part of the practice to learn how to interact with other people skillfully. And part of that, particularly for people who are pursuing the path of the Eightfold Path, developing mindfulness and meditation, so part of that practice will be finding times for some seclusion from other people, quiet times to develop your practice, because being on your own, you can learn a lot about yourself. It's often that's a suitable situation for practicing, but not always. So the Buddha gave us good instructions like, if you know the Mangala Sutta, Sewana cha balanang panditanang cha sewana, when you're mixing with other people, we'll try to mix with those people who are good people, who are moral, they're not cruel, too selfish, they're not people who are going to harm us, and we try and seek out people who are Kalyana Mitta, people who are wise, compassionate, kind, good examples, where you can. If there's no one who's a good example around you, or maybe you will have to spend some time on your own until you find that person. But generally, there'll be some good people in our lives or that we are exposed to, and we do have to put effort into finding them. So, that's why I went to Thailand, was to find practicing monks in the forest, because I thought I could learn from them, and I wasn't disappointed. Finding good people doesn't mean to say you have to ordain, but maybe associating with some Buddhists who have similar views, similar interests, who can share their experience and support us in the practice. For some of the time that is important, and then for some of the time we can find occasions where we can just be on our own. And that might just mean, you live in a house with a family, other people, but maybe for a period of time every day you're on your own in a room, maybe your bedroom, or a suitable place where you do your own meditation, chanting, listen to the Dhamma and reflect on the Dhamma for yourself. And then other times during your day you're mixing with those people, helping out, doing whatever duties you have to do. And sometimes even if you're in a situation where you have no physical seclusion, you can still find internal seclusion within a group of other people. We don't have, when we're with other people, we don't have to talk all the time. We can listen, we can be aware, but we can also be quietly observing our mind in a situation. You may be at work where you have your seat in the office or your space. Other people are coming and going, things are happening, but there'll be times when you can just quietly be with yourself, even though other people are around you, and you maintain mindfulness, can do a bit of mindfulness of breathing. When you've got a moment, you can reflect on the Dhamma through your day. We can do that. You're sitting in a car with someone else, you're not always talking to them. There may be periods where you're just quietly reflecting on your own state of mind. So as you practice mindfulness more, you'll notice that we do get opportunities to practice seclusion even when we're with other people. And if it's necessary, that's what we have to do. And you'll find those people who have practiced well on this path, say Ajahn Chah would be a good example, very little time for himself because he knows how to look after his mind. He's got the inner seclusion, the kindness, the wisdom, the compassion, the mindfulness, so that when through his day he was spending so much of his time in his later life teaching the laity and then at night teaching the monks, very little time to himself, but not stressed by it because he's got mental control and understanding of the Dhamma. So that's your goal in the practice, to get to that point so that it really doesn't matter too much whether you're on your own with others. You're able to look after your mind in all situations.
Thank you, Tan Ajahn. Serene's hand is still up. Could we take one last question on the phone?
Can, yeah, can.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a follow-up questions because I was muted just now. Follow-up questions from my previous question. So, like we are living in a house with other people, still about the pest problem. Do we, as a Buddhist, we throw away all our, pesticides, whatever in the house or the land? I mean, how do we deal with that?
Strictly speaking, yes. If you're keeping the first precept, then you don't need to purchase or store those products that kill pests, insects, creatures, because you wouldn't want to do it yourself, use it yourself, or encourage others to use it. And that is something that's important in the world. Like when I was a child, my mum and dad loved me very well, and they brought me up very well. I have no regrets. But they weren't Buddhists, so they didn't have that refined awareness of sila. So nobody encouraged me not to kill. Probably like in Singapore or anywhere else in the world, if a pest comes, the easiest thing is spray it or put some poison or spray it, get rid of it. And often we're unwittingly teaching our children or the people around us the wrong things, because if we use pesticides, well, they'll use them. If we kill things, they'll kill things, because that's what they learn from us. So not only are you protecting yourself from making bad karma by keeping the first precept, you're also giving a very important gift to the people around you. You're making it safe for those pests, they don't get killed, but also you're teaching other people how to live keeping the first precept. And people need to see that in the world, because often nobody is teaching them, no one's showing them by example. So some people in the world unwittingly make a lot of bad karma by killing creatures without realizing that they're making karma. So anything you can do in this respect can help. And one thing the Buddha pointed out is that the way the human mind works is if you get used to killing small things, what we'd call pests, little by little your mind is inclining to that way of thinking and solving problems. So the pests can sometimes get bigger. So, first of all it's ants, mosquitoes, later it's mice, later on it's snakes and frogs, later on it's cats and dogs, later on it's cows or horses, later on it's people. One thing can lead to another. Little by little there's an evolution of our mental defilements and the defilement of anger and greed that leads us to kill others because of protecting ourselves and the more sort of selfish interests. That can evolve into actually the thought to kill another person, just like a pest. So if you're really keen to train your mind following the Buddha, your aim is to keep the precept and give up that desire to kill and the intention to kill. And as I said earlier, you're using the creativity of the mind, the wisdom, to look for other solutions to the problem. So if you have fly spray, insect killers, sort of things that kill insects and pests, get rid of them. And just be a bit more relaxed and patient with these pests, and find other ways to deal with it rather than killing them. Maybe those pests will make you enlightened. Like one of the first lessons I had in Thailand was mosquitoes were everywhere when I went to Thailand, because we were in the jungle. There was no screens or buildings without windows. Everything was open, and we were in the jungle, so always getting bitten by mosquitoes. So it was challenging at first. What I learned was every time you have the intention to swat or kill a mosquito, but you have mindfulness of your precept and you cut off the intention to kill, your mindfulness grows. So in a way, the mosquitoes were helping me being more mindful. So in Thailand, we used to call them Ajahn mosquito, because an Ajahn is a teacher. The teachers make us more mindful. So after a while, I actually was quite grateful to the mosquitoes. Not that I like them, but because I realized they've helped me become a better person. So you can turn things around sometimes. The very problems, the things we hate, we don't like, the people, the insects, whatever it is, if you're treating them as a teaching, a learning, they may be what make you enlightened.
So thank you, Long, for your wise teachings and being our wise teacher this weekend.